Just go sit down. George and I got some work to do. Okay. Really freaky weather here today. Whoa.
Ready?
Yeah, I mean, we had a deluge. I mean, for like 20 minutes, you couldn't even see anything. It was just a wall of water. It's amazing. Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Okay, I just want to be sure. Yes, I think so.
20 minutes, you couldn't even see anything. It was just a wall of water. It's amazing. Okay, we have an echo.
Yeah, you have an echo?
Yeah, big one.
Already. All right, hold a second. Let's see. What about now? Do you have an echo now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Wait.
No echo, or is there an echo?
It was a very long gap. Okay, looks okay now.
Is that okay?
I think so, yeah.
All right. Let's then, let's see, all right, let's start the recording then. Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of Artie's talk show, Crosstalk, and we are back doing on YouTube live streaming and doing super chats, and it's always wonderful to see. It's always so delightful that there are already gagglers waiting for us with messages, and that's always, you know, it's always nice. It's like when you're going somewhere and already people there to greet you, and it's always very heartening. So we got Nigel Baird, our friend, London calling. Good, you know, hope the weather is good in London. Nigel says it's confusing to see George on the left of the screen and Peter on the right. I didn't realize that. I thought, because when I look, I just see us on top of each other. So we got Peter on the top and I'm on the bottom. So, but I don't know left, you know, why I'm on the left, but still. And then we have Balázs Hetinyi, who says hi. So that it's always good to have Hungarian friends. And then we have War 1980, pretend you're in Australia, and then Bradley Jones, welcome back. So it's very nice. So Peter, I mean, right now there's a meltdown in Washington over the Supreme Court ruling. I mean, it's not really our issue. We don't really talk very much about social issues. It's nonetheless quite interesting that these pro-lifers, they came up with this very ingenious scheme, which seemed to nonplus the courts, including the Supreme Court. They just didn't know how to respond to it. And there's absolute fury on the liberal media. MSNBC, CNN are just going ballistic. Interestingly enough, the Republican Party establishment is being very quiet. They've been their heads under the table because, of course, they're absolutely dishonest about these issues. They raise money every election on the abortion issue. Oh, I'm pro-life. I'm more pro-life than the next man. I'm 1,000% pro-life, and I'll fight to crush Roe v. Wade. And then that's it. They never bothered doing anything about it, and then that's that. This has caught them on the hop. They just don't know what to do with this. So it's a very interesting situation. We don't know whether this it will prevail in the Supreme Court, but nonetheless, this meltdown is fascinating to watch.
Oh yeah, but have no worries. Planned Parenthood will continue to be funded, and the Republicans will let it happen.
I will let it happen, exactly. Yeah.
I find that really, really disgusting. You know, it really, you know, in this era of virtue signaling and culture wars. I mean, these are just words. These are just words. I mean, George and I kind of have a radical position on this. I mean, we really moved the Overton window because we believe very strongly the Supreme Court has no business in discussing this issue at all. This is a state's issue. and it should have never gone to the Supreme Court. That we're really out there on this. But then again, so many of the issues that Congress has no spine and no courage, they just kick it to the courts, where the courts have no business to adjudicate these things whatsoever. Well, why does the Supreme Court justice know more about procreation than an immigrant? I'm sorry.
No, there's no reason whatsoever. They got themselves into this. They essentially went around the legislatures, which should have decided the question, because at least that represents the democratic will of the people, and then they legislate and so on. But they went around it and just decreed from on high these 9 justices, the whole 3 trimester divisions and so on. And that's been the law of the land for 50 years. But it's always been vulnerable. I mean, as science has developed and the viability of life outside the womb has grown, and we know so much more about the fetuses, and we see all these sonograms and everything, it's getting harder and harder to make the case that was possible back in 1973. Oh, this is just simply an appendage to a woman's body. You get rid of it just like you get rid of an appendix, or a cancerous growth.
Yeah, but George, if a woman is pregnant and she's murdered, then the perpetrator is charged with
double homicide.
Homicide.
Right.
I mean, I am not trying to throw a wrench into all of this here, but what I'm just saying here is there's no consistency, because it gets down to what your personal idea of the beginning of life, okay? And you can't adjudicate that. It is not in the realm of the courts.
That's right, and that's why they were very clever, these pro-life people in Texas, because they made it the heartbeat bill, and of course, well, no one wants to stop a heartbeat, whether it's of a fetus or a cat or a dog or a rabbit or anything. If the heart is beating, you don't really want to stop it. So it was very clever, but the way they did it, which is that it's not going to be enforced by government officials as normally, so that you can go and challenge the government official. It's actually going to be enforced by private individuals. That has thrown the courts into a loop. They just don't know how to go about it. Anyway, we have a super chat from Ryan Baudouin. Hope I pronounced it correctly. Very, very nice of you, Ryan. Very much appreciated. And Ryan says, it's a state rights issue, abortion not in the Constitution. The majority, according to polls, are against abortion, and a typical right-wing defense by politicians. Yeah, it's kind of our position. I think the majority is certainly against abortion after a certain minimum amount of time. I think, like after that first trimester, which is after 12 weeks. Definitely, when it gets into 20, 24 weeks, most people are strongly against it.
Yeah, we can't avoid the cultural dimension of this. I think you remember it was a couple years back. Maybe it was even during the 2016 election cycle, and I'm sorry, when it was when Trump got his openings on the Supreme Court, and of course abortion is all brought because they're going to ban abortion if they're conservatives on the court. And I can remember it was on one of these popular daytime liberal programs, where this famous actress or singer, or a celebrity, whatever because I don't follow that kind of stuff very much. And she says, my second abortion was my favorite abortion. And and that shows just the really intense visceral division, because when I hear that, my skin crawls. How can you possibly talk like that? But then in the studio audience, people are, cheering. Right. And I just find that revolting. I can't understand that kind of mentality. Okay.
Yes. I agree. So we got a message from Jenny Korn. She says, I understand the people who have said it's okay to take a life from a woman, but they never lose a baby. At the age of 20, I had a miscarriage, and I still feel the baby at the age of 63. No, I think that's very true, and I think that's true of many women who do have an abortion and then many years later they have great regrets about it, and suffer for having done this. And Jenny says, yeah, women miss a baby for the rest of their life. Yeah, I think that's true. And then we have Herman Montoya says, why can't we impose term limits on judges so the left and right won't pack the court? I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think it is absolutely ridiculous. And we've talked about this on the Gaggle before, that judges can just simply go on until they drop dead. I mean, and that often happens. They just drop dead to the age of 90 when they're obviously not even capable intellectually to be handing down these judgments. In other words, the judgments are being written by their clerks or by their court attorneys, but they just go on, then you just can't get rid of them. I mean, that's absolutely agree. There should be term limits. I'd say, I think 18 years max. I mean, that's more than adequate for any judge.
We have to remind everyone the reason why it was an open-ended lifetime appointment is because people didn't live that long when they started. Right, I mean, if you were 60 in like the 1790s, you were an old man. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And we haven't kept the institution hasn't kept up with our advances in health. Okay. Yeah. You're right. I mean, when you see these judges in the late 80s and all that, I mean, it's elder care, it's elder abuse. Okay.
Right.
I mean,
yes.
You should be with your grandchildren or great grandchildren.
Right. No, that's right. And so you've got this absurdity of they don't want to step down. I mean, we had Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, people go on about Trump. Oh, Trump got this judge onto the Supreme Court. Well, that was Ruth Bader Ginsburg's fault. I mean, Obama pleaded with her, please step down because I can then nominate a replacement who'd be just like you. But no, she wouldn't do it. I mean, you can't force her to resign. She wouldn't do it. And of course, she drops dead during Trump's term. Well, Trump said, thank you very much, and ran with it. And now the same thing is happening with Stephen Breyer, who also, I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure being applied. Please step down. We don't know how long the Democrats are going to be in power. He doesn't want to go. He likes this job. It's a nice job.
But it shows how the court has changed so much over the decades, because with very rare exceptions, these were not cultural icons. Okay, right. They're not supposed to be that.
Right.
See,
that's right.
You and I are very conservative when we look at the Constitution, and I turning them into like cultural icons and rock stars and all of that I find that very, very disappointing, because George and I, whatever the issue is, we say, well, it's not in the Constitution, so why are they talking about it? I'm sorry, we're very rigid on that, okay?
Well, that's it.
The further you go afield, the more it becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg loved the adulation that she received. I mean, there was this this petite lady professor or whatever, and then suddenly in later life, she became this rock star. People loved her, and she just enjoyed it. Enjoyed being the celebrity, and she milked it for everything she had. It's not unlike, the different context of, Henry Kissinger, who was kind of this pudgy professor at Harvard, who always was very unglamorous next to the JFK people, who were all handsome, waspy, athletic looking. He wasn't. he was always the poor man out because he had a minor role in the Kennedy administration. Then he suddenly became this rock star, hanging around with movie stars, Jill St. John and all this stuff. And he loved it. He played it to the hilt. Because it only comes, for a few years in a lifetime, you're suddenly a rock star. And so I think the same applied with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It suddenly came to her late in life.
Yeah, but it shows how public service has changed and what its purpose is. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. Look at like Tony Blair. Well, apparently being Prime Minister of the UK was just a stepping stone. That's check on the resume. Okay, and we see this over and over. We see it with Barack Hussein Obama. Okay. Right. I mean, we're going to have 30 more years of this guy. Okay.
definitely, at least 30 years. That's exactly. So we've got a question of Bradley Trogdon. There is no way Ginsburg did the work in her rulings late in life. I guarantee that her law clerks did nearly everything for her. No question. I mean, she had been in a kind of almost decrepit state for years and years. I mean, she did a video, I think, just to show the world that she was on the job, working out in the gym. But the only thing that you watched it say, this woman hardly knows where she's going. I mean, she sort of, picks up a pound, and that seems to already weigh her down. And it was just an embarrassment.
Who was the justice that retired? He surprised everyone. This was years ago, and he said that he was retiring because he found the work on the Supreme Court to be brain dead. And everyone shuddered, like, "Oh my God, how can you possibly say?" Who was that guy that just
was it David Souter?
Yeah, was it Souter? Yes, it was. Okay,
yeah, he retired quite early. Yeah, surprisingly early. Yeah.
This was amazing, and he was a good friend of Ginsburg. He was a bachelor.
That's right. He was a bachelor. That's exactly right. Yeah. So we have a super chat from Jonathan, who asks who was the first celebrity politician. So we'll talk about that, and then we have another super chat from Ryan Budwan. In the same notion with applying Constitution as originalist, judges who are 80 had cultural and social influences in the 60s. And they're out of touch, can't apply the Constitution to today's issues. Yeah, no, that's
very true.
That's exactly right. But on the question of the celebrity politician, well, I guess in the recent times, it probably would have to be JFK. I mean, he was he was the first celebrity politician. I mean, hitherto, he wasn't exactly the brightest of sparks, but he had the glamour. He had money, beautiful wife, and
it was Jackie. It was Jackie. What? I'll tell you guys, everyone, because I remember, when what Hollywood likes to do in popular culture, Jackie and Marilyn Monroe lived at the same time, probably certainly met each other, much to the chagrin of the Kennedy brothers. But, people project back and say that Marilyn Monroe was the epitome of beauty. No. When I was a little boy going to the library, the librarian had a Jackie Kennedy haircut, and my teachers had Jackie Kennedy.
Everybody had those Jackie Kennedy
haircuts. And when she came back from a trip, I think it was when JFK was still. Yes, it was because they were having some problems. She went off to a trip to Europe, and when she came back, that's when they went to Dallas because they wanted to show everyone that they were getting back together. But she brought all this French fashion back, which of course, like Kmart and all these other ones, duplicated. Everybody wanted to look like Jackie. That's where Jack Kennedy got his glamour, from an amazingly beautiful wife that was so poised, and women adored her. I mean, they adored her all the way up to the end of her life. That very famous picture of her coming out. She worked for Doubleday, right?
I think it was Doubleday. Yeah, I think it was Doubleday. Yeah. Coming
out, and she's just wearing a blouse and jeans and those sunglasses, and people just went nuts about it. Not about a big busty blonde. I'm sorry.
Right. No, I think that's a very good point. I think that definitely she had that glamour, and you remember the photographs. I think at the that Vienna, the infamous Vienna conference where Kennedy met Khrushchev, and there was Jackie next to Khrushchev's wife. Khrushchev's wife was the typical kind of Russian woman, look tough, strong farm woman, and Jackie was, of course, this glamour. And that really just showed the contrast between the two, even though when it came to the men, Khrushchev was clearly got the better of Kennedy. It was smarter, more aggressive, more energetic. But when it came to the women, she won hands down.
When they traveled, they wanted to see the wife of the president of the United States. I mean, it's such an amazing story. Okay. And I remember when she got married to Onassis, my mother was crushed. All of her friends were, how could Jackie do it? They would talk about her incessantly. Right. All of the glossy magazines. I mean, she, when growing up, we talked about Muhammad Ali, but my mother's friends, they talked about Jackie way after Kennedy left the White House.
Yeah, that's right. But of course, I mean, a lot of people admired her. A lot of people hated her. And so when she married
She married for
Onassis,
money.
exactly. So a lot of people said, yeah, that's exactly
She
what
needed
we
it.
would have expected. She needed the money.
Well, she had that publishing job. It was a
Yeah.
plum job. Okay.
But that was later on. She got that later on. I think by that time, I think Onassis had cut her off. So yeah. So that,
yeah, but I mean, did Kennedy family take care of her? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not sure that they did. I don't know that they did. So but there's no question. I mean that somehow from the moment of 1960, in the 1960 election, which was very close, most historians think that actually Nixon won that election. So people weren't exactly bowled over by Kennedy in 1960. And then suddenly he becomes this movie star figure, you know, with that hit little banal, Ich bin ein Berliner.
No, it was at the compound with the little kids and all that. I mean, you have to remember this is at the peak of the baby boom after the Second World War. I mean, it was the first family that we ever really got to know, because you know Bess Truman, she stayed in the White House for a few months and said, "The hell with this, I'm going back to independent."
Right.
Oh, Harry's there alone.
That's right. And that small, because he was quite young, so he has small children, unlike the others who were much older when they got to the Oval Office. So their children were already grown up. So that again added glamour, because you had little children playing in the Oval Office.
Mimi Eisenhower was terrified of people. She did not like the public attention on her. And then you come with this glamorous family that has never been repeated. Never, except for, I remember I went to a sports bar for Trump's inauguration, and I'll tell you, everyone, whoa, look at that lady. I mean, people really liked
but that's the interesting thing, and that's what's so striking really about Trump, because since Jackie, there really hasn't been a first lady to compare in glamour until Melania. I mean, Melania had been a supermodel. I mean, she wasn't just a model, a supermodel, well, you know, famous throughout the world. And even so, none of the women's magazines, none of the fashion magazines featured her. You know, they didn't want to have anything to do. The women's TV shows, they didn't do any features on her, and no interviews with her. It's like she hardly existed.
Oh, the View. Why doesn't she divorce him?
Yeah, that's so we got Herman Montoya asks, the Democratic Party will buy ad time attacking Republicans for abortion ban rather than addressing real issues facing Americans. I think that's probably true, but it's always very hard to know how the abortion issue is going to play out, because you've got, you know, people who feel intensely on both sides. So you never know who of the people who really will just be energized and try to, you know, get out and get the vote out. It's a wash whether it favors the Democrats more than the Republicans.
This issue already has its captive audiences. I don't see it moves the needle one way.
Yeah.
I think it'll chew up a lot of time and suck up a lot of air.
Right.
And of course, this is a switch and bait. Looking at this administration that is really, you know, kneecapped badly. I've never seen this. I've never seen this in my lifetime. Okay, right. Bill Clinton he struggled in the first few months, but nothing like this. Right. And he struggled because Hillary got in everyone's face and people resented him. We are the president. That was the magnitude of Bill Clinton's problems, but Biden's problems are only getting worse. So, you know, did you notice that Ida, you know, put that on the news there, which of course was a terrible event, a weather event. And then we found, just starting yesterday in the news cycle, January 6th, white supremacists, the Proud Boys are cheering on the Taliban. And did you notice it in lockstep, in the media?
That's right. So we got a super chat from Kevin Dorr. Thank you so much, Kevin. Very much appreciated. And he says that Souter was another great GOP pick, saying sarcastically, GOP has a 50% hit record with Supreme Court picks. Trump was 1 for 3. Kevin Barrett, not going to be good, very weak. I think it's a very interesting thing, because David Souter was George H.W. Bush's first pick for the Supreme Court. No one knew anything about him, because after the whole Robert Bork experience, the Republicans decided, hey, we want to pick somebody who's going to be on our side, but who doesn't have a track record. He doesn't have a paper trail. That's the word they use, a paper trail, like Robert Bork had. So they picked this person, David Souter, who no one knew anything about. He was a Supreme Court justice in New Hampshire. New Hampshire Supreme Court justice. He was selected by the White House Chief of Staff at the time, John Sununu, and then he turned out to immediately started voting with the liberal bloc of the Supreme Court, and then everyone, of course, hated him. But his second pick, Bush's second pick, was Clarence Thomas, not because he really knew anything about Thomas, but because he was replacing Thurgood Marshall. So, if you've lost one black Supreme Court justice, you want to replace him with another black justice, and so he picked Clarence Thomas. It turned out that Clarence Thomas became the leader of the conservative faction in the Supreme Court, particularly after Scalia's death. But that wasn't the reason why George H.W. Bush selected him.
Yeah, I think using this as an election ploy, we're going to get a seat on the Supreme Court. It rings hollow, George. I mean, right. You might get lucky, but that's about the best you can say. Again, everyone, what the Supreme Court does and what it didn't do last November is adjudicate differences among states. Okay, right. Everyone knows what I'm getting at here. Right. The vast majority of the cases that the Supreme Court has ever ruled on is basically commerce. That's what it was for, right. Interstate commerce. Okay, and it was in the 1960s, or after the beginning
the Warren Court. Yeah,
right, the Warren Court. This is where they wanted to seize it as a political football, okay? And we've been living with that ever since, okay? With very few, it happened, but with very few exceptions before that, you really didn't have the Supreme Court front and center, okay? And I blame the two political parties, and I blame Congress for not, manning up, as it were.
Oh, I think that's right. Yeah.
Hard issues. Yeah.
Because they basically relied on the courts for all of the social changes that were then enacted because through the Warren Court. They never really voted on them in Congress, and that's become a nice little enterprise. So because then Republicans can just simply say, hey, well, our hands are tied. There's nothing whatever we can do. Did our best, but give us money, give us more and more money, and we're going to get the right people onto the Supreme Court. Of course, they don't get the right people, but it just becomes their campaign theme. So it's been a kind of a cynical game that the Republicans have been playing, because ultimately, as we've discussed many times before, these people care nothing about other than tax cuts. I mean, tax cuts, deregulation, and that's it. But all the rest, abortion, affirmative action, this is just something you talk about at election time. But tax cuts, the lobbyists, keep the money coming, that's all they care about.
And being in opposition has never been a problem.
Oh, no. And then Ryan Berdowan, who's already helped us. He says, if it were not for Clarence Thomas, this country would be damaged far worse. And he's trying to lay a roadmap for the Republicans to take advantage of issues. I think that's right. I mean, Clarence Thomas has now blazed the trail on the issue of big tech. He's clearly thinks that something has to be done about big tech. He's now issued several rulings about which way it should go. I mean, he's saying that these big tech are like the
public square.
But what's that word? The
commentary.
Utilities. I like the utilities. They're like utilities. In other words, they have to be regulated. They can't just simply do, just like the electricity company can't cut off electricity for you because it doesn't like your politics. So in the same way, there has to be a regulation of the utilities. And he's kind of blazed the trail. I mean, he's made these decisions. So clearly, Thomas, which we didn't really think at the time, because again, when he came before the Senate, his Republican advisors told him, shut up, don't talk about anything. If they ask you about Roe v. Wade, say you don't have any views on Roe v. Wade, you've never discussed Roe v. Wade, just give them nothing. And that's exactly what he did. So it wasn't a very impressive performance until the whole Anita Hill issue came up, and he suddenly exploded. And suddenly you saw this rage genuine rage about what these people were doing. And I think there you suddenly saw something of his personality, which up until then, the way the White House wanted to control him, you didn't see any of. But the way he responded to Anita Hill, that showed you the kind of person he was.
And he's been the most underestimated Supreme Court justice since then. I mean, the number of hit jobs against him because he's a conservative, okay? Right. And the liberals hate Black conservatives. They really, really, really do, okay? Ask Larry Elder. He apparently is the black face of white supremacy, according to the LA Times. Extraordinary.
That's right. And what is interesting, again, is how you can get away with playing the race card against him. So when that woman, the black woman on MSNBC, the one who does that show,
Joyless?
Yeah, that's it, Joy. She said she refers to him as Uncle Clarence. Now, nobody thought this is despicable. You can't go around, referring to him as Uncle Clarence. But I think, hey, this is good. No one has any problem. Just like people make all kinds of gay smears against Glenn Greenwald. Hey, that's all right. So long as you're attacking him from the left, that's fine to start to bring up, homophobic slurs.
Yeah, I mean, and apparently Glenn Greenwald is a misogynist. Okay, yes. Apparently, in their strange world, I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah. And then Herman Montoya says the Supreme Court and the judicial system is pro-corporate, pro-Wall Street, and some of them are pro-big tech. They don't represent the people as politicians want to portray. I think that's right. I mean, I think that it's pro-corporate, and that goes even for the so-called liberal thing. I mean, Breyer was always a pro-corporate man. I mean, he was famous for being a kind of in charge of deregulation during the Carter administration. So he's always been a pro-corporate person. So, that's just is a given how the Supreme Court rules. It's always in favor of the big corporations, right. Liberals, conservative alike.
And always falling short on labor rights.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, labor, that never gets a look in. No, company entirely within its rights to fire anyone it wants. Yeah,
that's right. Limited liability, just
that's
like
limited liability. Yeah. So anyway, it's we've got this issue. I think is going to be I think kind of a salient issue because the Supreme Court. They're going to be deciding probably that other abortion case, the Mississippi abortion case, that's in the next term. So that's where it kind of can come down probably towards the end. They always leave the big decisions right towards the end. So that's going to be late June. So that's probably whichever way it's going to go. I think whatever happens, they are going to curtail abortion rights. I mean, I think the Supreme Court will curtail Roe v. Wade. I mean, I don't think they're just going to throw it all out, but I think they will curtail it.
I agree. But again, I think it'll suck up a lot of air. A lot of people will be yelling and screaming on television. But I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. People have already decided on this issue, so I don't see it's going to get much traction one way or another. People have already decided. They decided 50 years ago. Okay.
I think so. I think so. I don't think anyone's going to change anyone's mind. I mean, it's kind of interesting, though. Yeah, you're right. 50 years ago, which means that now 2 generations of people have grown up. So you think, well, you had all those people who were worked up about it in the 1970s, but now you got people who it's really their grandchildren who are now fighting it out. I mean, these people who pushed this legislation in Texas, these are young people. I mean, these are people born long after Roe was decided.
Well, all I can say is that those people that are so impassioned by this, I'm really glad that your grandparents had your parents and that your parents had you.
Yeah, that's right.
I have my own personal views about it. Okay, I don't need the heartbeat law to confirm my beliefs here. Okay, I just stand with my position. I don't believe the Supreme Court has anything to do with this. I think it should belong in the states and make it a political issue and make it part of the legislative process. Okay, that's how I feel.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, it's yeah, I mean, it really have no business doing so. You know, and as we discussed, where it did have a business in getting involved was the election, because here there was a clear dispute among the states. Election, boom, that's the Constitution has a lot to say about the conduct of elections. I mean, it's an awful lot there. While the Constitution has nothing to say about abortion or gay marriage or anything else. It doesn't have anything to say on that. But elections, that the Constitution is very specific about.
But this is the casualty of politicizing the court, because the court decided, oh, we don't want to get involved. No, you're obligated to get involved. That's why we have the law. That's why we have you. Okay, and just punting it like that.
Right, right.
This is a result of the politicization of the court since the 60s. Okay, right. And now we're seeing the downside of it.
Right, right. No, that's right. So you know, I think it's well, so as I say, I mean, so late June, I think that that's going to come down, and that'll be interesting. I mean, how, you know, they're going to try and play this, you know, going into the midterms. But you're right in that at the moment, you know, I think Biden is in a free fall, because now a perception has been formed of who he is, and that's not a good perception.
Not going to change.
Yeah,
that's not going to change.
Yeah, that's right. So you're right. I mean, you know, in the case of Bill Clinton, I mean, you know, Bill Clinton, the first term, not the first term, in his first 2 years, wasn't terribly successful, but largely due to that, you know, his failure with the Hillary care. Did very poorly, but the perception of him was fairly consistent. That didn't really change. People didn't like him very much. He was a, you know, slick Willie, but that was kind of baked in, just like Trump. People don't necessarily like him personally very much, but they kind of think that he was actually a fairly effective leader. I mean, the media say, oh, he's incompetent, he's an idiot, and so on. But I don't think that's what the public thought of.
Also, you had a Republican Party that had its act together, yes, too. Okay, yes, much more so than today.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was really the first. I would even say it was the first year, not the first 2 years. The first year, I mean, I remember when Time Magazine had some semblance of relevance. It had its cover, "The Incredible Shrinking President."
Right.
It was Bill Clinton.
Right, right, all right.
He got reelected, folks. Okay.
He got reelected, and you know, why did he get reelected? Well, because the Republicans selected a person who never in a million years will win a presidential election. I mean, you know, you look at Bob Dole. There was no way.
Get off the grass.
Yeah, exactly. You know, this is, you know, he was bad-tempered, very unlikable. He was also, and this is something that counts a lot in America, distinctly shorter than Bill Clinton. It's superficial, but when you have presidential elections and you have a debate and they're all standing on the stage, Americans tend to go for the taller guy.
And also because he came from that generation, and you actually saw this through the Republican Party, is that it's my turn. I mean, I deserve to be president.
It's my turn.
Who's this guy? Who's this guy? I mean, he truly believed that. He truly believed it's my turn. John McCain felt the same way. It's my turn. And it also bleeds into the Democratic Party, because Hillary said, it's my turn.
That's it. No, I think that's a very good point. And I think that was they made fun of Bob Dole, I think on Saturday Night Live with that I think it was with that line, it's my turn, you know, with that particular Bob Dole snarl. So yeah, no, there's no question. Yeah, go on.
But you know, Bill Clinton, I mean, everyone wants to talk about the origins of the current economic situation. It goes all the way back to Bill Clinton. I mean, he was a blue dog. I mean, blue dog. That's what he was. Okay. I mean, the end of the New Deal as we know it. Okay, I mean, he did more deregulation than any Republican that I can think of.
That's right. That was exactly. That was an absolute bedlam of deregulation in the Bill Clinton era. He had that guy who was his Treasury Secretary, Robert Rubin. This is Wall Street. I mean, the guy is Mr. Wall Street. And of course, and what did Bill Clinton do? He deregulated Wall Street and helped bring us the 2008 financial crash. Anybody could have foreseen, that once you break down all the barriers between retail banking and commercial banking, then everything is just going to go to pot. And of course, but Robert Rubin didn't care. After he left, he made an absolute bundle. I mean, we went off, got a big job in Wall Street. So that was all under Bill Clinton. I mean, it was absolutely dreadful time.
Yeah, but Bill Clinton was the first Black president, and he was Bubba. Okay, you can even see how the cultural, we didn't call it really the cultural wars that much back then, but he played upon. So once he's showing, he's open to gay rights. He has people of color in his administration, and then that's all for the cameras and the press. Then he goes back in the Oval Office and says, let's deregulate everything. Okay, really a truly duplicitous guy.
Right? Yeah, no, that's right. I think he was the first Black president because he was, the reason they said that, he was kind of a scoundrel. I mean, it was, basically, he just really didn't behave himself with the due decorum expected of presidents. At least, with JFK, we knew something, in later years, we found out, about what he was doing. But at the time, they still maintained the facade of this happily married young couple. But with Bill Clinton, you didn't even have the facade because we already knew before he became president of what he was. We had that was it Jennifer Flowers. Yeah, that who already came forward, and there were others. There was.
And who was the hitman for him? Hillary.
That's it. Yeah. So all of that. So everyone knew this is what he was doing in the White House. So and that's why I said, he's the first.
He was the first trailer park president.
First trailer park president. Yeah. He was a terrible president. But since the economy was doing fairly well in the 90s, so people say, okay, well, people have happy memories. But of course, the internet boom collapsed early on in the Bush years, and then of course the big financial collapse took place in 2008. So eventually you had to pay for all of that. Yeah. So here we have Star Rover. Clinton accomplished the Republican agenda that even Reagan could not accomplish. Yeah, I think that's right. And then John Arnold says the deregulation was forced upon Clinton when the Republicans took the House in 1994. Well, I wouldn't say it was forced upon him. I think that Clinton did what he was quite happy to do. No one forced Clinton to hire Robert Rubin as his Treasury Secretary. He surrounded himself with all of these Wall Street types. Larry Summers was his economic advisor. So, obviously Gingrich's Republicans were very much on board, but that was Clinton. Clinton did the triangulation, the famous triangulation from 94 to 96. Bill Clinton was very happy with that. He never really liked the left very much, so he kind of abandoned all of that pretty quickly.
That was the key to his administration was Newt Gingrich. Okay, he was the one. Clinton followed Newt. Okay, I remember the Love Fest. Remember they were having all of this here, and then the Democrats thought they could the Republicans thought they could repeat that under Obama, and he was a dastardly bastard. He led them down the aisle in the last seconds. Right. Oh man.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Now, I think in terms of foreign policy, I think Bill Clinton was a truly catastrophic president. I think the legacy of Bill Clinton is something that lives today. I think the expansion of NATO and all of the consequences that have flowed from the expansion of NATO. That was undertaken by Bill Clinton. Clinton decided on all of that, despite warnings that this was not going to go well. And then that whole onslaught on Yugoslavia, for no other reason than to find a new rationale for NATO's existence. That was all Bill Clinton. And if it hadn't been for that onslaught on Yugoslavia, we would not have had the Iraq invasion. We would not have had the Afghanistan invasion. It was somehow this idea, hey, we can just do these bombing and invasion, and we're going to always win because, Russia is now no longer a player on the world scene, and everything is going to work out great. Yeah, that was all a consequence of Bill Clinton's frivolous foreign policy.
And the beginning of the notorious list of B-listers as Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright.
Okay.
What a low for
American
foreign policy. And it's only been duplicated since. Look who's Secretary of State now, okay? That's exactly. Madeleine Albright in a man's suit, okay?
That's right, yeah. Madeleine
yeah, similar haircuts too.
Yeah, she was quite something else. I mean, she had this half-baked ideas. She got them from Zbigniew Brzezinski. I think she studied under Brzezinski at Columbia. But I think her father, I think, was rabidly anti-communist. And he had been an academic, rabidly anti-communist, and she kind of cobbled this all together into her kind of demented vision that somehow America is the indispensable power, and that everywhere there are these totalitarians, there are fascists, communists, Nazis everywhere, and America has to fight all these horrible people all the time. Completely, I mean, talk about somebody who's had the worst education imaginable, cobbled it all together into a truly poisonous world outlook.
And she was basically a parlor gadfly. I mean, she had no credentials to become Secretary of State.
She was a parlor gadfly, yeah, exactly.
She was a Washington gadfly.
That's exactly what she was, because
she famously said at the United Nations, "America stands taller, thus it can see further." She's probably the shortest Secretary of State we've ever had.
That's very true. Yeah, she was, because of course what she did, a very smart woman, she married into money, and marrying into money meant that she could be a kind of a socialite, a Georgetown socialite, and that built her credentials that she was some sort of a foreign policy expert. So that's the only reason. And she had all these Georgetown dinner parties. And they all thought, oh, she's obviously somebody, she studied under Brzezinski, so she must be really smart. And that's it. I mean, unfortunately, there's too many careers built on having money and connections. I mean, Blinken himself. I mean, why does he have this job? Money. I mean, his father had a lot of money, and that propelled him into the higher reaches of the Democratic Party.
It has nothing. See, that you can be credentialed all you want, okay, but it doesn't mean you're competent. See, This is that's finally come to light. Okay, I've been saying it for a long time. Now it is patently obvious. Just because you went to a certain school and you have trust funds doesn't mean you're any more competent than someone that went to community college, like LBJ, which is probably the most masterful politician of his generation.
Right. No, I think so. I mean, yeah. What was that? Where did he go? Was it Texas Teachers Training College or something like that he attended? And so he was surrounded by all these Mac Bundy, president of Harvard, Dean Rusk, I think president of Rockefeller Foundation, Walt Rostow, professor at MIT, McNamara, former president of Ford. I mean, you see Texas Training College, Teachers Training College.
But he, looking at his biography, it did kind of, he had pangs of doubts about himself.
Oh yeah, no question.
But at the juxtaposition is, here's a guy that went to a teacher's college, and then he ended up running the U.S. Senate. Okay, right. Yes. And that's no small feat, George.
Yeah, no, that definitely. He definitely knew that. Yeah. So Herman Montoya reminds us about Anna Kasparian's tongue bath to Madeleine Albright at I think it was at the Munich Security Conference. I've seen it. I mean, it's on YouTube. It's well worth watching. It's in its embarrassing, horrible, obsequious way.
Well, Tony Fauci has his issues with gain of function, but Anna Kasparian has gain of stupidity. Okay.
Yes. And then Balash Hetinyi, it talks about Rwanda, Clinton and Rwanda. It said the Clinton, correctly, he says Clinton supported the RPF. Many tried to investigate what really happened there. And then Carla Del Ponte brought that to an end. And so, yeah, absolutely, because what happened in Rwanda was triggered by the assassination of the president of Rwanda, who had been a Hutu, and many people believe that it was the RPF, and that was responsible for the shooting down of the plane that led to the president of Rwanda's death. And then everything just sort of brought to an end. But the Clinton administration was backing the RPF. I mean, the RPF was waging a civil war, and the Clinton administration was backing it. So it was a disastrous policy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for reminding us. So Rwanda, along with Yugoslavia, is another source of shame for the Clinton administration. Then John Arnold says that. I know it was meant to be a joke, just wasn't sure if you were aware. Norm Macdonald used to do a good Bob Dole on SNL. Yeah, I think so. I think it's Norm Macdonald who I'm thinking of, because I can see now, and it's a long time ago, I can see him now with that snarl, because, Martin!
And you guys, that's when Saturday Night Live was genuinely funny. I never missed it, okay? And they took their swipes at everyone, okay? For me now, it's just unwatchable. I haven't watched it for 15 years.
Okay. And then Ryan Burdwan has given us another super chat. So thank you so much, Ryan. Very much appreciate that. And he says, not sure if this is too off topic, but can you discuss the more center-right conservative countries of Europe? Aside from Hungary, Poland, you don't hear much information. Looking for travel places. well, just on the travel places, there's plenty of places to travel to. I mean, they're all beautiful countries. The politics I think, is a different case. Well, it's very interesting with this this kind of center right is that you get these governments in there, but who somehow then evaporate. So we had a kind of center right government in Italy with Salvini. So the Italians had an election. They voted in the center right. They wanted to bring immigration under control. But now who's in charge in Italy? There's been no election, but the person in charge is Mario Draghi. Mr. Globalization himself. The European Central Bank. So you have these people who just people vote. They want change, so they bring in someone like Salvini, and then they vanish. And everything goes back to the Mario Draghi. So I think there's an awful lot of that there's somehow the pressures of Europe that they just push out these kind of, I guess, right-wing populist sort of governments.
Oh, and also some right-wing populists, so-called, it's a way to get into power, okay? And then once you get there, it's a means to an end, okay? I mean, so they use these slogans to rile people up and get themselves elected. But once they're in the club, their enthusiasm, if I could put it that way, stalls. Okay, and it's a pattern. It's a pattern.
Yeah. So I got another super chat from Kevin Dorr. It says the U.S. mainstream press is not reporting on the Biden-Ghani phone call after first being tough on Biden for Afghanistan. Now they're switching to cover his rear. Well, that's kind of an interesting issue because we had the partial transcript of that call between Biden and Ghani, and it's certainly very, very unflattering to Biden. I mean, Ghani calls him, says, hey, the situation is desperate. And then Biden just sort of rambles and said, well, we might give you air support, providing you can just sort of change the perception. And so that you've got some sort of a plan, but he was just simply doing nothing. I mean, the fact was that if Ghani says, look, we rely on U.S. air support. If you don't give us air support, we're just going to collapse. And for Biden then to turn around and say, well, if you give us something that would change perception, Well, Biden is the president of the United States. He can call in air support anytime he wants. In fact, he didn't. And I think that did lead to the collapse of the Afghan forces and to the humiliation of the United States. So I think that telephone call. Kevin, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's very, very unflattering, and the sheer lack of courage and leadership from Biden, and indeed the media are really not covering it.
Oh yeah, I mean, look what they did with the ridiculous phone call that Trump had with Zelensky. Right. How many times have you read that transcript? I've read it a dozen times, and for me, it was this vintage Trump. I'm rambling all over the place, stream of consciousness and all that. Impeachable, huh? Yep. Even this telephone call, in my mind, is not, okay, as despicable and feckless as Biden is. You see, the problem I have with all of this, the contents of that conversation horrify me, but doesn't surprise me. However, I don't like this leaking, okay? The president of the United States, if you like him or her one day or dislike him or her, you have to have a little bit of latitude to do your job, okay? And so again, who's the winner? It's the deep state, okay? And people are missing the point here. They're missing the point. Was it a bad call? Yeah, but it's a bad call for the bottom line of people that want forever wars, and they're still out there, okay? They're trying to discredit Biden, not because he made bad decisions. He did make bad decisions, but they want to discredit anyone that wants to go down this path, like Trump tried to do, and he was, quote unquote, rammed. And so I'm not going to absolve Biden for any of this. I mean, he's just an awful leader. I mean, he is the most empty suit Washington has had for a half a century, okay? Right. But what I don't like is undermining the president. I don't care if it's Biden in this case, or undermining the president to do his job. And this is very insidious, because what it is it shows the media is so grossly pro-war. It's really, American media is militaristic to the hilt, okay? And they are the stenographers for these people that want to continue to bleed the country of treasure, of its youth, and not do a damn thing about the people that live in the country. They don't even care about borders, okay?
Right.
So
no, but
I have very strong feelings about that.
The issue here is that, look, you've trained this Afghan army. It basically can only fight under one condition: when they get close air support from the United States. Biden, let's say, all right, Biden wants to exit. Now, there are ways of exiting. Remember, there was the Nixon-Kissinger exit. There was the Nixon exit, which was you go out, all guns blazing, and then say that, well, you try anything, we're going to come back in. It would have in the case of Nixon, he had a plausibility that while he was there, while he wasn't weakened by Watergate, he could have fulfilled that part of his promise that we will provide you with air support. That's our strength. What Biden did was he said, okay, we're leaving, just hand over the air base. And then when knowing that the Taliban is mounting an offensive, he said, we're not going to provide you with air cover. Well, of course, what happened then is, of course, the Afghan army their morale collapsed. And, if that's how they rely on fighting wars, then their morale will collapse when suddenly they don't have air support. Biden, who had the option, he could have done it. There was no question. He could have done it and could still have exited Afghanistan. He could have at least stabilized the front so that at least, the Taliban advance could have been halted, so that he could then leave and still wouldn't have been a collapse in Kabul. What you got is that there was a collapse in Kabul and the Americans were still there. That is the worst possible. And the South Vietnam debacle was not that, because when the American forces left, there was still a government in place in Saigon. So that was Biden. Biden engineered this horrific debacle, and he had an opportunity here to somehow alter the dynamics.
Yeah, but not enough focus is put on Ghani, because, after that phone call, did he say, fuel up the jet and get the luggage on, get those pallets of millions of dollars on? Okay. Joe Biden, he was, he's been part of this fiasco. He was a senator, then he was vice president. You can't tell me with a straight face that none of these people knew the kind of characters they were dealing with in Afghanistan. And I think they were willfully lying to themselves and just hoping it was going to work out. I mean, I think it's very complex, and I think it's a lot of gross dishonesty on the part of so many players. Okay, I mean, and this Ghani guy, it's not like he was some villager that was elevated. I mean, he was a university professor in the United States. I mean, he was hand chosen. So much for Afghan democracy and all of that. Again, just a lot of very bad faith players all the way around, in my opinion.
Right. No, I think it's right. But there's no question. I mean, America came out looking very, very pathetic, and I think Biden's leadership was very, very pathetic.
He was the wrong guy to do this. Okay, right. We know now.
All right. So we have Kevin says, agree not impeachable and shouldn't be leaked. My problem is the media not covering the story. Well, I think it's a very good try. I mean, it's it was in Reuters, but I mean, other than Fox News, and I think probably with Fox News, I don't watch Fox News during the day, but I think Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity covered it, but I don't know whether anyone else on Fox covered it.
And when that happens, this is exactly what CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times want to do. They say, well, that's a Fox News story. They did it again.
Right. So we have the Star Rover says, I wonder if the Afghanistan army was not infiltrated by the Taliban, perhaps the number of 50%. It would not surprise me one bit. Well, I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that the Afghan army was infiltrated by the Taliban. I think it was clear that the demoralization set in very quickly, and then they were basically just handing over their weapons without.
What is it? You probably know the phrase. I've come across. I mean, you can't buy loyalty; you rent it. Okay, and that's exactly what happened.
Right. So Herman Montoya asks, this is again a very interesting issue, which is the Russian government is open to recognizing the Taliban in Afghanistan after a lukewarm reception from Sergei Lavrov. I'm not sure. It's hard. I mean, I think they're open to a recognition, but what they're saying at the moment, I mean, Lavrov says it, Zaharova says it. Well, the Taliban needs to set up an inclusive government. Everybody has to be in it. So they're not going to accept a Taliban-led government. They said there has to be an inclusive. Then they're making this very clear that any kind of recognition would be conditional on this being a part of an all inclusive, all ethnic groups, nations, whatever, have to be part of this government of Afghanistan. So we're a long way from that. So I don't think when people are jumping the gun to say, "Oh, Russia is about to recognize the Taliban government."
I think also, just to add a layer to that, and agreeing with you here, is that what is this current situation in Afghanistan? Okay, I just said loyalty is it's not bought, it's rented. So as we saw the Afghan army collapse and the government become paralyzed, I mean, I'm in my opinion, the way I look at what Lavrov's words are, is there still a civil war going on in your country? And if there is, I mean, we're not going to back one side. No. We saw one country do that for 20 years. Okay, right. We're not going to do that. And the Soviets obviously have their experience in Afghanistan. I think that the Russians are very much, let's wait and see where it goes. Again, I think because of how the Western media covers it, is that this is like some end of something in the beginning of something else. Now, I think it's a lot more foggy than that, okay? And they want to see how the dust is going to settle on the ground. I think it's a very prudent approach to take.
Well, I think so. And to be honest, I mean, what I'm finding quite troubling, well, first of all, I'm very troubled by the $90 billion worth of hardware that's now there, because chances are they're going to start selling this off to all sorts of interested parties. I wouldn't be surprised if quite a lot of that is going to end up in Syria. They're going to probably do a deal with Turkey, and then Turkey will just transfer this directly to Idlib. There's a lot of hardware there, with armored cars, guns, planes. You know, I mean, if that goes to Syria, then you've got a huge mess there. So I think that's a big issue about what happens to this weaponry. And again, that goes back to Biden. You know, what kind of a country is it that just leaves and leaves $90 billion of military hardware to these people? I mean, you know, I mean, these are not good guys. So you leave them all this hardware. So that's another issue. But now the Pentagon is talking about joining forces with the Taliban to fight ISIS-K. That's the worst possible thing. I mean, the idea of getting involved in the civil war in Afghanistan, you know, one bunch of gangsters against another bunch of gangsters, that's the worst possible idea.
I agree with you absolutely. Again, but there's this impulse to try to get back in. We have to go back and get the stranded Americans. I mean, there's one layer there, and then we need to get some of our equipment back, and then maybe some kind of loose affiliation, coordination with the Taliban. This is all nuts at this point. It's all nuts, okay? And I don't think I think that would be a very perilous thing to do. But again, that's another way to keep your claw in there, okay? So again, I still think it's very, very early. I'm not really sure at this point in time the Taliban are going to want to see. First of all, I think they're going to want to keep a lot of it, particularly the small arms. I mean, some of the footage I've seen, and this was courtesy of RT. We had one of our correspondents there. Looking at the helicopters, at least something, look at Kabul airport, all of the machinery was destroyed. Okay, so the highest tech stuff probably isn't operable. And even if it was, they're not going to be able to keep it in shape for very long. I tell you, it takes a whole brigade of people to maintain one.
Well, I think that's right. But that's why, well, absolutely. That's why I think that if they are going to sell it, they'll probably sell it now, probably to Turkey. Turkey, I imagine, would know how to maintain it, particularly as Turkey is a NATO member and so would know something about American hardware. And I can imagine them moving it to Turkey and then Turkey then moving this to Syria. Look, this, you know, we've known exactly what happens to these arms transfers. I mean, look what happened after the overthrow of Gaddafi, when they shifted all of the Gaddafi's armory to Syria. So I think it's quite likely that a lot of this stuff is going to go on the black market and is going to be shifted to hotspots around the world. And I think Syria is the hottest.
It's very conceivable. It also, it may depend on the words of the Taliban, because that's all we have from them right now. Do they want to irritate the U.S. and Russia would be very upset about that.
Russia would be, right? Yeah,
they would be very upset about that.
I think they would be very upset. I think a lot of people are very upset. I think a lot of
and that goes back to what you and I have said repeatedly, that when their first stint in power, 96 to 2001, they pissed off everybody. Are they going to do that again? That remains to be seen. It remains to be seen.
Right. No, I think so. But I mean, I think that. I mean, Russia is sort of watching this warily, and you know, their position is just, you know, it's just somehow, you know, they're obviously getting their kicks in to the United States. Hey, you created this mess, you know, and so on. But they would certainly be very, very concerned about a large migrant flow into the neighboring Central Asian countries, you know, Tajikistan particularly. Yep.
Which by the way, George, is that Russia and Tajikistan are working very close. I think the deal has already been closed about control of the sky. So they've integrated their intelligence and surveillance. Okay, the Tajikistan knows what's very possible. What could?
Well, I think so. Yeah, but you know, look, we know, you know, controlling borders is no easy task. So that's going to be it's a big deal. I think Iran is very concerned again. Migrant flows. I mean, you know, you know, these are all kind of Persian-speaking countries. I mean, they're also, you know, they're actually quite close. So, but Iran has very bad memories of the Taliban years, particularly, you know, all the trouble that they created in Iran with the Baluchistan and so on. So they're wary, and again, wary about migrant flows from Afghanistan. So I think a lot of countries in the region are looking very, very warily at the Taliban.
Yes, they should.
Yeah,
as they should.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's right. So let's see, we've got so, I mean, Herman Montoya makes a point about the $85 billion worth of military hardware instead of helping people in America. Yeah, that's always, there's never any money. You know, you want your libraries kept open an extra hour in the evening, forget it. Hey, no, there's no money for that. You know, but hey,
Yeah, but isn't it
hardware,
really?
there's plenty of money for that.
Yeah, but isn't it very interesting, George, is the Soviet Union, its economy stalled in the 80s. And, you know, and it still, you know, was funding all of these proxy wars around the world. Okay, I mean, again, it's a parallel that I see, is that, you know, the concerned with foreign policy fantasies instead of the real problems at home.
Yep, that's right. So John Arnold says that American civilians and non-essential personnel should have been the first people evacuated. Yeah, I mean, again, evacuation is something that you would have thought the military would know something about how to organize, you know, how to do it, you know, the step-by-step process. You know, yeah, you get the civilians out, you get the hardware out, and then you get your soldiers out, all in a proper organized fashion. None of that happened, and you know, and again, the terrible complete disintegration with it, which I think you know Biden is responsible for, and then the completely disorganized, chaotic exit. Also, you know, Biden, and this time in the military. I mean, it's an embarrassment. I mean, it is a joke. I mean, what the Americans did. We talk about the Soviet Union. They managed to march out in a dignified, organized fashion. They didn't leave behind all their hardware for the Mujahideen to help themselves to.
And also, I mean, maybe this is naive, but once the Taliban and their allies realized that the U.S. is real about leaving the country, I think they probably would have just let them do it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, we want you out. You're leaving. Okay, go. Okay. I think people underestimate that. And what gives credence to that is that we'll find out one day, George, what kind of communication the administration had with the Taliban, because apparently they had quite a bit, okay, of communication.
Right. Yeah. So, and then Herman Montoya again asks, will the Taliban sell these American military hardware to ISIS in Syria and other terrorist groups in Pakistan? Yeah, we talked about that. I think that's quite likely. I mean, you know, maybe via Turkey, but I think I think that's quite likely. I mean, an awful lot of it there. So there's nice source of revenue to start off with.
It's very possible, particularly given the fact that before the evacuation, and now I hear again that the new government in Kabul has been talking to the Turks to run the airport.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. So, and then what about the dogs? As I mentioned, I think Jenny Combe talks about the dogs that they left behind. That's a kind of an interesting story, because people say, oh, all these people are dead, oh, the hell with them. But you leave dogs and cats behind, people get upset. That's something people get really upset about.
Tucker did a segment on it. I'm sorry, everyone. Everybody knows I'm a big dog person, okay? And there was this humanitarian airlift out. I'm glad. I'm glad. Okay, fine. Okay, that's just my personal preference there.
Right. So this we have Al QK, the super chat. Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Says, was watching CSIS yesterday. They seem very eager for the NGOs, the banks, and the investors to be able to have the green light to resume operations in Afghanistan. Not sure the human rights is the issue here. No, I mean, I think that's right. I think that there's an awful lot of people hungry to make a buck in Afghanistan, and they'll be able to rationalize it. Well, we're trying to get ahead of the Chinese. We're trying to get ahead of the Russians. We're going to get. The Taliban are going to be with us. I mean, look. Remember, back in the 90s, initially, the Clinton administration was not that hostile to the Taliban, I mean, because they thought that, and it's a long story. I mean, Americans have always been quite sympathetic to Islamic fundamentalists as long as they can use them against others. They figured the Taliban is just going to be bad news for Russia, bad news for all of the countries in the region, but they'll be generally pro-American because, hey, America
not anti-American.
Because we helped the Mujahideen in the 1980s. We helped you to get rid of the Soviets. So you're going to be on our side. So there's always been this long strand in U.S. foreign policy making of siding with Islamic fundamentalists. So the Clinton administration was quite sympathetic to the Taliban initially. I mean, remember, they arranged for Osama bin Laden to go to Afghanistan after the Taliban came to power, because he was kind of an embarrassment to the Saudis. I mean, his father was a big, prominent Saudi businessman, but Osama was an embarrassment. So they arranged for him to go there. You remember he went to Sudan first, made a mess of things in Sudan, and then they said, well let's get him out of Sudan and dump him in Afghanistan. So the only reason Americans really turned against the Taliban was because of all these terrorist attacks. I mean, but Islamic fundamentalists, hey, your job is to make life difficult for Russia, for the Serbs. Your job isn't to make life difficult for us. And I think that's why the Americans turned on the Taliban in 2001.
Well, I'll probably get a lot of arrows shot at me for this, but I'm very dubious of the humanitarian impulse these people have. I mean, these are NGOs. It's considered an extreme hardship post, and it's paid very, very well in many, many cases. So I'm sorry, I have to doubt the motives a little bit here, Jordan. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I absolutely doubt it. But I don't doubt for 1 minute that there are people eager to get back into Afghanistan and see if they can make a buck there, see if they can get the Taliban onto our side, so that, hey, so that you're not going to be with the Chinese, you're not going to be with the Russians, you're going to be with us. Yeah, I mean, all this kind of thinking, no question. I can quite imagine CSIS, there are people there who go to the job, chin wagging, that's what we need to be doing. So Herman Montoya says, American military personnel vandalized their own hardware in the airport and no consequence. American civilians vandalized property at home, a tremendous amount of consequences. Why is that?
Well, you can if you're a Capitol police officer, you can leave your firearm in the toilet, okay, and no consequences. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, George, maybe you'll correct me on this. I think it was in the early 90s that Congress finally demanded that there'd be an audit of the Pentagon, and just got lost in the shuffle. Okay. That would be probably the most horrific report ever written if you really, really found out how wasteful. And right. For those people that are green concerned, the biggest polluter in the world is the U.S. military.
Yeah. No, I think it's the wastefulness is quite staggering, because again, when you think about all these policymakers are sitting there, $90 billion worth of this hardware, and they just didn't even give it a thought. Hey, what's that? It's just pocket change. That's just a measure of how much they squander. I mean,
close enough for government work.
Right. Yeah. And
well, you remember the scene from Apocalypse Now, call in a fire airstrike, when they're, surfing and all that and blowing up that island, it's just for fun because I can do it.
Yes, that's it. And remember, what was it? This was a story that was, it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Somebody set fire. Was it a destroyer ship set fire? Yeah. Was it $5 billion worth of damage?
It burned for a week. They couldn't put it out.
Yeah. And this is somebody did it. This was arson. So this is $5 billion worth of damage. That is one.
And they couldn't put the fire out.
They couldn't put it out.
Kept burning and burning.
Right. Yeah.
I came across quite a bit of it was a very weird story, because
very weird, yeah.
the person that they're claiming and the witnesses and all that, there's all contradictory and motives and everything, very bizarre. Will we ever know? Probably not.
Probably not. No, I'm sure that's something that will be covered up. Like it was, I remember that that fire, the fire on that warship in Southeast Asia, which John McCain was involved in. Something like more than 100 U.S. servicemen died. Yeah. Yeah. And but they got McCain out because his father was this very big admiral in the U.S. Navy, and they didn't want the embarrassment of the John McCain was actually involved in setting that fire. So, but again, you just think of it: some incompetence, and 100 or so of your servicemen are dead. I mean, it's just shocking that when you have so much money, that you just throw it around in this reckless way.
Apparently, the U.S. Navy can't avoid hitting other ships, even their own ships. I mean, what is going on with these people?
Right. Yeah.
Remember the guy? He had these tourists on. It was a submarine. I would think it was an attack submarine, so it's one of those smaller ones that can move really, really fast. And he had these Ivy League kids on, with some kind of, trip, and then he just said, I'm going to surface the submarine now, and, he's at a very high angle and he hits that Japanese fishing ship.
Right.
Like, well, what, don't you have any sonar and radar? Deal with all those people. At least they made him go to Japan and apologize.
Yeah. I don't know did the Japanese accept his apology? I don't know.
I don't know. What can you do? Okay. Oh, what about that captain of that ship? They come down with COVID and all of that, and and he's telling the truth. We need help. I don't know what protocols he broke. Apparently he did, and and then he's like fired on the spot, and then he's being taken off the ship like in shackles. And his crew is cheering his name. Okay.
Yeah.
Boom, he's gone.
That's right. Yeah. No, it really is just an extraordinary, because wastefulness, and you can see how they, you constantly need to justify this massive expenditures. You constantly have to manufacture these dire threats all over the world. I mean, you really, you think about, the world, there just aren't that many threats, right now. I mean, they're very, very minor. And, not too long ago, we had the Cold War. Cold War seemed to be like that's a serious conflict. Then before that, we had 2 world wars, very serious. But we just don't have those threats. I mean, but you've got to keep justifying this. Got to go, ratcheting up the threat.
I remember watching with my father. He was a veteran of the Second World War. He fought in the Pacific Theater, and we were watching the evacuation of Saigon. And remember, George, everybody talks about the helicopters leaving the American embassy. I remember when the helicopters landed on the aircraft carriers, and then they threw the helicopters overboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then even my father, which was pro-war. Okay. My father was pro-war. And he said, they keep deep sixing all of these helicopters. They couldn't use those helicopters to win the war. I mean, he was just like, well, we had all this stuff and we lost.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So it really is a kind of an extraordinary thing. I mean, we go through this thing. I mean, look at when Zelensky is in the White House, and there's Biden saying, well, we've already provided you this year $400 million worth of military hardware. That's $400 million. That is an awful lot. Who the hell knows where that hardware has gone? But and then well, here's another check. Here's another 60 million. I mean, these are big sums of money, and they just get thrown around because, again, you have the threat expansion. You have to keep ratcheting up this horrific, all the horrific threats. Ukraine is in the front line fighting Putin. And the Washington people, CSIS and AEI, they sit there saying, yeah, Putin is seeking to gain advantage. He's trying to use Afghanistan to his advantage in order to, I don't know, to take over the world. I mean, this is the fantasy world that prevails in Washington.
Inflation, threat inflation is the name of the game, okay? I mean, when Maria Bartiromo, she's the most jingoistic host on Fox, they're not increasing defense spending. Inflation's 5%. They're not even increasing it. He's a lunatic, absolute lunatic.
Right.
After everything they wasted, okay, and you want to give them more? See, this is the wrong, and there's no incentives here to do anything right. I mean, Milley still has his job. Blinken still has his job.
No, exactly. They will have to, exactly. No one has paid for anything. No one.
And there was that guy, I think,
except that lieutenant colonel. Yeah.
Yeah, that lieutenant. But what about that submariner? He took pictures of his inside his compartment in the submarine, and he sent it to a friend or something like that, and it became public. And that's like sedition. I mean, the guy just took. I mean, and his whole life is ruined. Look at these guys at the very top. Oops. All right. Oh, okay. We'll talk about Ukraine now. Okay. Afghanistan. Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. So I mean, some people. Herman Montoya says probably that military hardware went to neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. I think he means the military hardware in Afghanistan. I assume that's what he's talking about. Yeah, or maybe the military hardware from the Biden administration has sent. Either way, I'm sure that much of it is heading towards Ukraine. And again, I mean, it's that whole thing with Ukraine is all of it utterly kind of wasteful, utterly frivolous, and basically, a disastrous policy. I mean, it's like, you're arming these people, egging them on, and then thinking, oh, well, like at the last moment, I can just restrain them. You've got this hungry, you've got this hungry dog. You've got a Doberman pinscher. Hey, and then you just pull him back at the last minute. It's only so long that you can keep doing that.
That's right. And it's just a whole issue of moral hazard. Okay. I mean, are you throwing chump change just to keep them happy, or they could actually do something with it? Because, Ukraine and Russia are neighbors. Russia has a very, very good eyes and ears in Eastern Ukraine. Take my word for it. I've been told by people that definitely know what's going on. And if they want to make trouble, they will rue the day. Because then all bets are off. No more pussyfooting around, okay? That is an intolerable red line. And there are people think that they can play a game of chicken here. They are very, very wrong. Yeah. Because invading, Grenada and Panama, overthrowing Honduras's government, those are all things that they have in their power. It's despicable behavior. But you want to poke the bear? Do it at your peril.
Yes, yeah, I think that's right. That's exactly right, and that's why exactly what America's doing. They fight Panama, they invade Haiti, you bomb Libya, infiltrate and sponsor terrorists in Syria, bomb Yugoslavia. Always weak countries that don't know how to fight back. I mean, that's how America operates. You don't want to get yourself into a situation where people do fight back. Kind of what happened in Vietnam is only these people know how to fight. They go to Vietnam, they know how to fight. They've been fighting a long time, and they're not just going to be pushed around very easily.
The number of times growing up talking to Vietnam War vets, I was always startled when one of them would say, we should have been on their side, because they knew how to fight. Right. They were real warriors. There was a real admiration and respect.
Yeah, I agree.
And then look what happened to the Afghan army.
All right, Peter. Let's it's not about wrapping it up. Do you have any final closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we started out with this on this abortion issue. It's something that you and I don't really talk about very often, but I think it's very interesting how the political establishment and their minions in the media are really trying to transform the narrative. It's very interesting to watch, and of course, that's what we do on this program. We question and, if necessary, destroy media narratives.
No,
So, Judge Nugget, keep it very. And I want everybody to know, I am still on vacation. Under the Russian labor code, I have to take a month vacation every single year. It's paid, and not this Sunday, but next Sunday, George makes his triumphant return to cross.
Triumphant! I'm back! I'm back, baby!
George is back.
Schwarzenegger said, "I'm back, baby." That's, yeah, looking forward to that. That'll be great. No, that's, yeah, no, but I agree with you. It's we don't often talk about it. It's not quite our issue, abortion, but it is it's kind of very interesting how suddenly you've changed the whole dynamic of the debate, and suddenly everyone is thrown off kilter. No one knows exactly how to respond. I mean, these pro-life groups had come up with a very ingenious scheme, and no one has figured out what to do about this.
It's very interesting, though, is that, controlling the media narrative, everything is apocalyptic. Haven't you noticed it? Everything.
Oh, yeah, it's always apocalyptic. Yeah,
it's always apocalyptic. It's always
the end. Yeah, absolutely. It's always the end. Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. I always apocalyptic. That's it. Yeah, yeah. No, I think so. And you say this is the end of Roe v. Wade. Well, look, it's been there 50 years. I mean, it's not sacrosanct. I mean, everything has to be revised in the light of changing facts, changing circumstances. Yeah, I mean, a 50-year-old decision needs to be re-examined. So
our hair is on fire. We're very sober in looking at these things here. Right. All righty.
All right. So that was second live chat. We're doing this every week. So we're going to do another one next week. It's a lot of fun. Thank you so much for all of your excellent comments and questions. Particularly, thank you for the super chats. That was very, very kind of you, and we really appreciate it. And we will be back very shortly. All right. Thank you, and bye.